Hello, Year 11. So last lesson we looked at the German economy in 1933 to 39, and we looked how it appeared that the Nazis had created an economic miracle. So unemployment reduced from 6 million in 1933 to just 302,000 in 1939. The Nazis had achieved this through things like the RAD, that's getting young people into work, forcing them to work, through massive infrastructure projects such as the building of the autobahns, the motorways, and a massive push for rearmament, both in terms of factories building weapons and getting hundreds of thousands of unemployed young men back into the army. So again, at first glance, the Nazis appeared to have worked an economic miracle. But is there another side to it? Can we dig a little bit deeper just to expose what life in Germany was like for workers between 1933 and 1939? And did everybody really economic miracle the Nazis claim to have delivered? Okay, so on to the next slide. So there is one interpretation where you could argue that the Nazis created changes in the standard of living that made German people better off. So the Nazis were aware that compulsion alone could not fully guarantee complete obedience to the government. So to win workers over and make them feel part of the creation of the people's community, the Volksgemeinschaft, various schemes were introduced. These acted as incentives and they proved quite successful. So first of all, Strength Through Joy, the KDF. This was an organisation set up by the German Labour Front. The KDF tried to improve the leisure time of German workers by sponsoring a wide range of leisure and cultural trips. These included concerts, theatre visits, museum tours, sporting events, weekend trips, holidays and cruises. All were provided at a low cost, giving ordinary workers access to activities normally reserved for the better off. And in 1938, more than 10 million people took KDF holidays. You can see a poster there advertising a KTF cruise, and you can see on the little graph with the red bars just how many millions of Germans were engaging in activities like hikes, films, exhibitions, concerts, opera, theatre, variety show because of the KDF, the Strength Through Joy programme. There was also the Beauty of Labour. This was a department of the KDF that tried to improve working conditions. It organised the building of canteens, swimming pools and sports facilities. It also installed better lighting in workplaces and improved noise levels. The Volkswagen scheme. In 1938, the Labour Front organised the Volkswagen, the People's Car scheme, giving workers an opportunity to subscribe 5 marks a week, a small amount, to a fund eventually allowing them to acquire a car. And wages, average weekly wages rose from 86 marks in 1932 to 109 marks in 1938. So there's an argument that German workers felt better off. And then finally, food consumption. As in every sphere of life, food became a target of Nazi propaganda. Women were informed which food to buy and how to cook simple meals, which were healthy and cheap. The Eintopf, a one-pot dish comprising meat and vegetables, was encouraged and became known as the meal of sacrifice for the nation. So you've got a lot of things there. The KDF programme, the Beauty of Labour, the Volkswagen scheme, wages going up, food consumption, that all suggest that after 1933, after the dark years of the Depression, 1929 to 33, the Nazis have brought some prosperity to Germany. But there is another argument. So let's look at the next slide. So there is a convincing argument, actually, that when you dig a little bit deeper, people in Germany, many people, were actually worse off under the Nazis. Because although the Nazis offered schemes and incentives to workers, not all workers benefited. Women, for example, were denied employment opportunities, some basic rights of workers were removed, and the cost of living rose. So let's have a look at these. Lack of freedom. German workers lost their rights under the Nazis. In 1933, trade unions were banned and they were replaced by the German Labour Front. And the Labour Front was designed to have all workers and employers striving to create the Volksgemeinschaft. The Labour Front did not permit workers to negotiate for better pay or reduced hours of work, and strikes were banned. And those who opposed the Nazis were rounded up and sent to concentration camps for re-education. So the Reich Labour Service, as we looked at last lesson, also made 6 months labour service compulsory for all men aged between the ages of 19 and 25. The Strength Through Joy programme. Very few workers could actually afford the more expensive activities such as cruises to Madeira and Scandinavia, Beauty of labour caused much resentment as workers had to carry out improvements in their spare time and without pay. So if you wanted a swimming pool, you had to give up your holidays and your weekends to build it without pay. So on paper looked good, in reality not so good. The Volkswagen swindle. The idea to encourage people to save to buy a Volkswagen was a con trick. Despite being encouraged to put aside money every week, by the time war broke out in 1939, not a single customer, not one German, had taken delivery of a car. None of the money was ever refunded. So that's like a carrot, encouraging them with a promise that would never be delivered upon. So the cost of living. The cost of living increased during the 1930s. All basic groceries except fish cost more in 1939 than they had in 1933. And food items were in short supply, partly because it was government policy to reduce agricultural production. This was to keep up the prices for the benefit of the farmers. So source H is an indication of how foreigners saw the issue of food consumption in Germany in 1934. So that cartoon's quite simple. It's going back to that 1933 promise the Nazis made to the people: vote for us, we will give you bread and we will give you work. A year or so later, this French cartoon is poking fun at this promise because there's been a Nazi revolution, the Nazis are now in charge, and yet the workers, the people, are still hungry. So the hours of work. The average working hours in industry increased from 42.9 per week in 1933 to 47 in 1939. And sources I and J and figure 12.3 give clear indications of the long, hard work and long hours workers were expected to perform under the Nazi regime. So yes, you could argue weekly wages had gone up, but they hadn't really, because people were just working longer hours. So things got tougher under the Nazis. So you've got all this balancing information. So for all the better off stuff we looked at on the last slide, there's a lot of this worse off stuff. Okay, you've got a hypothesis at the top of this slide, and it's the state of the economy and working conditions were better under the Nazis. How far do you agree? So this is an evidence hunt. So you've got to look through the information I've just talked to you through and find out arguments saying yes, things were better. And I've started you off with a statement of fact. Unemployment had reduced from 6 million in 1933 to just 302,000 in 1939. Can you, in that column, find other evidence from the notes to suggest that the economy and working conditions of people had got better? But once you've done that, look through the document and find out all the evidence that you can muster, that you can find, suggesting that things were worse. Things have got a bit tougher for the German people. And obviously you need to read pages 98 to 100 and complete this research table. And that will give you a view on the hypothesis that perhaps some things improved, but not everything. So it is a mixed picture. It's not as positive as it first seems. So that's your task today, just to get this hypothesis down and then underneath it, get this grid done and do your research based on pages 98 to 100. Well done, Year 10. Well done, Year 11.